So what you may not know about Bari Weiss is that she was a student right here at Community Day School. She was the oldest of 4 Weiss kids, 4 Weiss girls who were wise guys. That was a joke. Who were wise guys, right? Cannot be Lou Weiss. They're the grandparents and the parents, and so she found her audacious voice on the stage here at Community Day School many years ago. We were in Annie and the Sound of Music, right? That's right. Middle school musical. She realized that she had a voice, and then she started using it, and it wasn't just for singing. So we're happy to turn it over to our students who are going to run this, and we're grateful to have you. Let's give a round of applause.
Can you guys hear them?
So why don't we just hold the mics in our hands so that everyone can hear our new things. That would be fantastic.
Okay, before you get to it. Okay.
First of all, I just want to say thank you guys so much for having me here. I have pretty much only wonderful memories of coming to school at CDS or Community Day. I forget what the branding is now. But I'm just really excited to be here. And can you guys, just so I know, introduce yourselves to me so I know who I'm talking to and what grade you guys are in and how you got up here.
Okay, I'm Shuli. I'm in 8th grade and Anti-Semitism Council President.
Awesome. I'm Madison. I'm also in 8th grade and I'm Student Council President.
Okay, great. Now grill me like we're on CNN.
If you were to pick one article that you wrote to represent you, what would it be?
That's a really good question. So I write on a really big range of subjects. Just in the past few weeks, I've written pieces about Rosh Hashanah, I've written about Eminem's cipher at the BET Awards, I've written about Harvey Weinstein, I've written about Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, so I write about a lot of different things. It's hard to pick one to represent me, but one issue that is really important to me is the issue of free speech on college campuses and the idea that anyone, sort of regardless of their viewpoint, should be able to express it. And one thing that's happening a lot, I don't know if you guys know about this, on college campuses, is that oftentimes people that are strongly pro-Israel are getting shouted down or discriminated against by professors. And that's an issue that I've cared about a lot since I was a college student at Columbia, and that I've sort of continued to care about, and I continue to write about it. Now I used to do it at the Wall Street Journal, now I do it at the New York Times.
Do you think being a Jewish woman has affected your success as a journalist in a positive or negative way?
Oh, that's a very good question. I always find it hard to answer questions about my Jewishness. Like, you know, there's a big question people like to ask, are you an American Jew? Are you a Jewish American? Which part is more sort of important to you? The reason I find it so hard to answer is because my Jewishness is so fundamentally a part of who I am. It's not something that I even think about like checking at the door when I go into a space or when I go into the New York Times. It's something that is very sort of fundamental to who I am. So I guess the answer to your very smart question would be, it has helped me tremendously, because one of the things that we look for in opinion journalism, but in journalism in general, is people with a very particular and unique voice. And being able to talk about who you are and the way you see the world from your perspective. And my Jewishness and my Jewish identity and my Zionism and my sense of Jewish pride have impacted that pretty much for my entire life, really. And that's, in a way, what led me to be a journalist entirely was my sense of Jewish identity and really wanting to write about issues that matter to me as a Jew.
Have you ever written a piece that you wish you hadn't published?
Whoa. I'm sure the answer is yes, but I want to think about what that is. It's a really good question. Can I tell you a story that I think is related and maybe interesting? So I can't think of a piece that I wish I hadn't published, but one thing I can tell you, can you raise your hands in this room if you guys are on Instagram or Snapchat or social media yet? Okay. That's amazing. And by the way, keep your hand up if you're on Facebook. Wow. Okay, so Facebook is for the moms and the grandmas. Okay, I think that's really helpful. So, one way to answer this question for me is that one of the hardest things about being a journalist right now is that you get an unbelievable and immediate reaction to anything you publish. It used to be that you wrote your thing in the newspaper, and then you'd wait a little while to get a piece of snail mail in the mail to hear from readers who had problems with what you wrote or loved what you wrote. It was sort of, there was a lag time between publishing and hearing from your readership. Right now, that's immediate. And one of the things that's very, very difficult about being a journalist, especially being an opinion journalist with really strong opinions, is that people tell you when they hate what you write. And they can say really, really cruel things about you. And so one of the hardest things is to have the courage of your convictions, to have integrity, and sort of to not give in when people attack you. So the story that I wanted to tell you is that there's been a lot of there's been a lot of reporting in the media recently about disturbing stuff going on in Hollywood with this producer, Harvey Weinstein, that he assaulted a lot of different women. And so there's a lot of pieces, the op-eds that are getting submitted to me from women who work in Hollywood, from women that have strong things to say about that. And we ended up publishing a piece by the star of The Big Bang Theory. Her name is Mayim Bialik. Do you guys know who that is? You've seen that show? Right. So I had gone to her to ask her to write a piece about what was going on, and she was really, really excited to write about it. And you can read her piece, it's on the internet right now. It's called Being a Feminist in Harvey Weinstein's World, and it talked about the kind of choices that she made in terms of personal modesty, in terms of the way she presented herself from the time she was 11 years old and was the star of a major show when I was growing up called Blossom. What happened was that what a lot of us in the paper thought was a very, very reasonable and thoughtful piece got really, really attacked on Twitter. And she ended up in the end, and this is something that can happen, really sort of ended up sort of apologizing in a way for what she had said. I'm telling you this because this is someone who is a major celebrity. She has a lot of money, she has a lot of power, but the power of the sort of mob that can gather on these social media platforms that you guys are growing up with can be really, really powerful. And I'm telling you that because it's something to keep in mind when you guys are on these platforms, and I know it's something you're growing up with, to realize that you're talking to a real person on the other end of it, which is sometimes something that we can forget when you're not looking at another person in the face, and it's something that I really thought about this week. I'm sorry that was such a long-winded answer.
So this is kind of related. How do you overcome sexism and anti-Semitism in the writing industry?
Glad you guys are coming out here with the softball questions today. How do you overcome sexism and anti-Semitism? Really good question. It has a lot to do with courage. And one thing I think, and this ties back to your earlier question about the way my Jewish identity has affected my success or not. I think being Jewish gives us a really, really wonderful roadmap for how to be courageous in the world. If you look, going back to who's the first Jew of all? Exactly. And what did Abraham do? Abraham had the courage to argue with God. Abraham had the courage to argue with God. More than that, what did Abraham do? Abraham had the courage in a culture that worshipped idols to go and smash those idols and say, no, I don't want to be a part of this. I want to stand up for what I really believe, which is belief in one God. And with that, he radicalized and transformed the world forever. And so for me, the very best thing that I can do is sort of look back on our legacy, which is an unbelievably rich legacy, and look at people that have that I've admired as Jewish heroes and heroines, and that really strengthens me, honestly, more than anything else. When I think about, okay, great, some trolls attacked me on Twitter today, but then I think, look at Natan Sharansky, look at Hannah Senesh, look at what all of these people who I am heir to their legacy have done. They've been much, much braver than me. So sort of putting it in perspective personally really helps me.
What inspired you to become a writer?
What inspired me to become a writer? I never thought that I was going to be a writer or a journalist. There are a lot of friends that I know that are comedy writers or playwrights or journalists that are in this business that like kept a million journals from the time they were 5 years old and knew they wanted to do this. I was forced to keep journals the 2 summers that I spent in Israel by my parents, which I'm very glad I did. But it was always, writing was always hard, and it still is hard. Writing is a really, really hard thing because you have to have a very clear idea of what you want to say, and it's sometimes very hard to think very clearly about a complicated subject. So I never thought that I wanted to be a writer. I really came to it as a political activist. I mentioned before about all of the sort of, that a lot of times on college campuses it can be difficult to be a proud Zionist, and that's something that I experienced when I was a student at Columbia. And I started off as a political activist, and I realized pretty quickly that actually it was much more effective to write columns in the student paper, and that was a much more effective way to change people's minds, which is really what I cared about. I really cared about convincing people that I was right. And the way to do that, I found, was not really through protest ultimately, although protests can be really important, but through writing. And that sort of set me on the path when I was around 19 years old. And I went from there to starting a magazine when I was in college, working for an Israeli newspaper, and then it just sort of kept going. And even now I'm like, I can't believe I'm still doing this, but it really seems like the right fit for who I am. But I thought about being a rabbi was the other thing I was gonna be. I'm glad I'm doing this.
Okay, in your piece, you don't have to be Jewish to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. You explain to people what Judaism is. If someone were to walk up to you on the street and ask you what Judaism is to you, what would you say?
Oh my God. I would probably give the Hillel answer, which is to love your neighbor as yourself, and all the rest is commentary. Now go and study. That's the crucial part. Probably something along those lines. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Hillel. I feel like he's a strong one to go with.
What challenges
My grandmother.
What challenges do you face being a journalist?
Which challenges do I face? Okay, so the challenges, there's a few ways to answer this question. Right now we have a president who, as all of you know, has, in very scary and demagogic ways, is attacking the whole idea of a free press, right? He's always tweeting about fake news, the New York slime. It's the kind of autocratic behavior that we're used to seeing from leaders in places like Turkey, not in the United States. So that is the context in which all journalists, I don't care if you're at the New York Times or you're a blogger working on your own in Iowa, that is the context that we're all operating in right now. And so that is a really, really big challenge when the President of the United States is attacking something that is essential for any good functioning democracy. So that's something that's going on and that we're all really aware of, especially at the New York Times, because he really, really likes attacking the New York Times. So that's the meta big picture. The smaller picture is that I'm someone that doesn't necessarily fit into a political box. For a long time, I worked at the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is sort of, it's conservative. It's a center-right editorial page. And I was probably the most progressive or left-wing person when I was there. Then, after Trump was elected, I left to go work for the New York Times. And now I am sort of the most right-wing person at a really liberal editorial page. So the hardest part for me, honestly, personally, thank you, is being in an environment where I don't necessarily share the same viewpoints as other people. The upside of that, and that can be isolating and hard, the huge, huge upside to that is that we are increasingly, and I think you guys will see this more as you go into high school and college, we're living, you guys have you guys heard about the idea that we're all in our bubbles, right? That everyone's living in their bubble. There was a really good SNL sketch about it. it's very important in a time where you can just be in a little bubble with the people that agree with you, to branch out and talk to people that have really, really different positions. That's really the way that I've come to my own ideas about things. The only way you can figure out what you think is by talking to people, civilized, smart people, who disagree with you and really coming to understand their position, and it helps you sharpen your own. So I would say the hardest part is also sort of the best part. But keep going.
What advice would you give to your middle school self?
That's a great question. That being cool is really overrated, and the nerdiest people end up being the very, very coolest people. And that maybe sounds trite, but it is so, so true. I was a cool girl up until 7th grade, when I became a not cool girl. And as my parents can attest, it was the hardest, even now, 7th grade was the hardest year of my entire life. I had a really bad haircut. People called me Boris, to be mean to me. Although I love the name Boris and I think it's very cool. Now I know a lot of Borises. And it was really, really hard. And I think what made it especially hard was that I had put so much stock in being the cool kid, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And it was a really humbling experience. The thing that really came out of it for me, so I was in 7th grade here, and all of a sudden I wasn't cool, and the kids who had been grungy were the cool kids, and everything was turned upside down. And what ended up happening, though, is that I found my very best friend in the entire world, who was the only gay student in our class, and he's my very best friend until this day, and he was the person that stood by me. So I really found my friends during that period. But anyway, I would say that stuff doesn't matter, and the cliquishness that can sometimes happen in middle school, I would tell myself then, if I could go back, when I felt really alone, that all of this stuff will pass, and that it passes.
What advice would you give to a budding writer?
To a budding writer? That's a really good question. So, one thing I would say is that, and this goes back a little bit to what I was saying in the beginning, figuring out what you think and having clarity of, you can't write a good piece unless you have a really clear idea of what you want to say. So before you can write well, you have to think well. And before you can think well, you have to really understand things. So at this stage of your lives, I would really encourage you to be reading a lot, reading really widely, reading people you disagree with, especially if you're interested in opinion writing, newspaper columnists, but just great novels. And I mean, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I could be in middle school and high school and just spending all my time reading great stuff. So for sure, at this stage, reading. In terms of writing, because you really need to read a lot to be able to write. In terms of writing, I would say, find the things that you are uniquely capable of writing about. One thing that happens a lot at a place like the New York Times is a lot of people have really strong opinions about the Iran deal, about healthcare, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Pretty much everyone, every adult in America has an opinion about that. But guess what? Frankly, we don't care, because we can get the person who made the Obamacare deal, or the person, or the Israeli prime minister, or the head of Hamas, or whatever it is. You have to think about, as a writer, what you are uniquely capable of writing about. And that's my biggest piece of advice when we get interns, or with people just sort of going into college and writing. I ask them to think about, what do you have a particularly unique perspective on? And start from there.
How do you think your CDS education helped you to grow and become a writer?
Honestly, CDS was fundamental for me, not just, for sure, in terms of my intellectual growth, and I had amazing teachers here that I really loved. But one thing that CDS teaches, I think, really well, that not every school does, and I really learned this. I was earlier today, I was at Shady Side Academy, which is where I went to high school. and they were asking me a lot of these questions, like, how did the high school shape you? And one thing I realized when I was there was that a lot of sort of my best qualities in terms of being a mensch and doing the right thing are things that I learned here at CBS. Like that, I'm sure that it's still true, but that was really emphasized. Like, not just getting the good grades and getting into the best high school and college, okay, but what is real success about? Real success is about being a mensch, and it really, I mean, that happened for me here, and so it was really foundational.
What motivates you to continue to challenge yourself in your career?
What motivates me to continue to challenge myself in my career? Well, I mean, there's no better feeling in the world than having your piece, for me. There's no better feeling than writing something that you feel proud of, putting it out into the world, and having people engage with it and read it. I mean, that's the biggest motivator in the world for me, is like, there's glory in it, for sure. It's really exciting to see your name in the font of the New York Times. Like, that's awesome. But it's the engagement with readers and realizing that you're reaching so many people, and then that makes you think, I just want to do more and more and more of that. And, I joined the New York Times probably 5 or 6 months ago, and honestly, like, there are really hard parts of it. But I'm still waking up every day and thinking, oh my God, like I can't believe I get to do this job every day. Like, I would do it for free. My job is to write stuff that I feel strongly about and get other people in the world, get their voices into the paper, and I really love it. So that's the biggest motivator. I'm sure the excitement of that will wear off at some point and I'll have to find something else, but it's certainly not money, because you don't make a lot of money as a journalist.
When I was reading one of your articles, I found myself laughing out loud. Like, how do you know when comedy is appropriate?
That's a good. Was it the bucket list one?
No, I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, so I really like writing. So I have 3 younger sisters, one of whom is here and teaches at Colfax. That's her. But my very youngest sister, that's my sister. So my very youngest sister, all of my family honestly is really funny. My grandmother is here and she will tell you she's the funniest person in our whole family. But my youngest sister is a really funny writer, and with comedy pieces, my first readers, before I even send it to my editor at the New York Times, is my sister for funny pieces. And I really like writing funny pieces. A lot of my friends write for late night or they write in comedy, and I really like trying to do it. It's something that can't be forced. I try and find opportunities for it, but it's a different kind of writing. And it's a challenge, I don't know what piece you're thinking about, but I try and write a satirical piece probably like once every 6 weeks or something like that. But it's hard to pull off, and honestly, the biggest test for me is what's going on? I trust also my other readers and editors. So I remember I wrote a piece once that I thought was really funny, and I showed it to an editor who I think has a great comic sensibility at the Times. And I was like, be really honest. Do you think it works or not? And she was like, I love you, doesn't work, not funny. Great, done, moving on. And it never got published. And that's you gotta kind of trust the reader. If they're telling you it's not working, it's not working.
You've worked at Tablet Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. What has been different about working at these places?
Okay, so the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are both really big newspapers with lots of different departments and big budgets, and those two are pretty similar. The big difference at Tablet, how many of you know what Tablet is? Okay, a few. So Tablet is a really awesome online-only publication that focuses on Jewish culture, news, and politics. I edited the politics section there, and I wrote a little bit, but I was mostly an editor. The main difference there is that it was a little bit like being in CDS. Like, it was really, really a family environment. I think I wore sweatpants most days to go to work there. I was like babysitting other people. Like, it was very much a familial environment. The other big difference is that I had really strong positions on 98% of the things that we published, because it was all my world. It was all Jewish, Israel, culture, everything I cared about. And there's a really big difference between being in an environment like that and being at a place like the Wall Street Journal, where I have to edit op-eds about, financial policy or healthcare policy. So that's the really big difference.
How has your Jewish identity changed throughout the years?
Do you guys want to be here for a lot of hours? How has my Jewish identity changed throughout the years? Oh my God. Well, the one thing that's been really consistent, and I think that this is both a credit to CDS and the kind of family I grew up in, and frankly, the Pittsburgh Jewish community, is that I've never had an antagonistic relationship with being Jewish. I really love it. I'm really proud of it. And it's sort of strengthened me and guided me really in all ways in my life. So that's one thing that's been consistent. The thing that has changed is one thing that's changed a lot is my level of religious observance. I've gone through different periods. I went through a period in high school and then a lot of college where I totally kept kosher and I totally kept Shabbat. I've lived in Israel. I've had different levels of religious observance. I could see myself going back to it. I'm not there right now. So that's the thing that I would say has been changing a lot. The thing that's been really consistent, though, is that for me, I lead with my Jewishness, and that's been really consistent. This is a much longer conversation, though, and maybe one for my therapist or you.
What is your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of my job? The people that it sounds cheesy, but in addition to the actual work, I love the actual work, but the coolest part about it is I get to meet the most awesome people all the time. Like, that's a part of my job, is to call up a celebrity, call up anyone you want. Like, one really awesome thing about working at the New York Times is that everyone calls you back. And you get to work with really, really thoughtful and smart people, not just the other editors in the office, but other writers that might not have otherwise been able to be in the New York Times. Getting to work with them is the best part of the job. You guys are doing great.
When did you realize you wanted to be a journalist? Was it like a specific realization, or was it kind of over time?
It was over time, and it was realizing that it is a job that basically pays you to have chutzpah, and that's a really good job for me, it turns out. And a job that is getting paid to to debate ideas all day and politics and culture. I can't believe you get paid to do that. So those are all things that I do anyway. And so it's a really cool thing if that it's also your job. But I could imagine myself doing different things, and I'd like to, maybe work on TV projects or fiction projects or do other more creative things. But I really like being in a world with other creative people where the work is intellectual work.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Jesus. Kofefe? I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite word. I like the word audacious, which Avi used in the introduction. I think that's a really, really good word. I find myself using that word a lot. I have to think about that. I don't have a ready favorite.
Okay. What is your favorite Yiddish word?
Shlomil, Shlomaz, I don't know, I love Yiddish. I use a lot of Yiddish in my writing. My favorite Yiddish word? I like Shlomil. I think it's Yiddish is very good with takedowns, and so I like using it for that.
Minias or Ayelas?
Oh, All right, I know the right answer here is go kosher and get Milky Way, but I am majorly a yellows because the sauce is sweeter. And I have a Hitler in the front row who's Minions. You guys should have it. You guys should do a debating society here. You should do a Minios Aiellos debate. Sorry.
Do you have a least favorite word?
Least favorite word. I hate the phrase fake news. I will never think of the word huge again or the word sad exclamation again. And I hate the way that Trump's language has sort of infected our vocabulary and the way it's degraded language. But yeah, I would say fake news is my least favorite this year.
If you weren't writing for your job, what would you love to be doing?
What would I love to be doing? I had to answer this question on a podcast. Honestly, the answer is rabbi. I don't want to go back to school for 6 years, so I'm not going to do it. But I've officiated something like 5 weddings, and I mean, in a lot of ways, it's similar to journalism. It's different than journalism, but it's talking to people a lot. It's talking to people about things that are often sensitive. And, you know, again, engaging with ideas and engaging with Judaism. So I like all of those things. But you gotta believe in God pretty strongly to become a rabbi is the other requirement.
What would you never want to do?
Never want to do? I'm sorry for the math teachers in the room, but I'm so sorry. I was a C straight student in math for my entire career. Anything involving math, it's still really hard for me. And it's essential as a journalist, like you need to be able to do basic math. But I saw my geometry teacher from high school earlier today, and I just apologized to her because I really was, I'm sure that I was horrible to have in class, but anything with math, although for those of you who are good at it, it is like such an important skill, and I probably should have studied science and math the whole way through, because those are the kind of jobs that exist right now. But yeah.
What is your favorite TV show?
Oh my God, my favorite TV show. Can I have a few? Okay, favorite disgusting, I'm so embarrassed, shameful, guilty TV show is The Real Housewives of New York. Don't tell any of your parents I said that. But my favorite show, I have a few. I really love Broad City. I don't know if you guys watch any of these. Okay, they don't watch Broad City. And I like Seinfeld, obviously. All right, crowd pleaser in this room. I like Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I really love this Israeli show called Fauda, which is about, it's really good. You guys shouldn't watch it. It's definitely not like middle school appropriate, but when you get a little older, you should watch it. It's about Israeli operatives operating in the West Bank, and it's really awesome. It's like Homeland, which I also love. But I don't have a TV, I should add that. So I watch all of this streaming. I don't have a TV, and I haven't since college.
Okay, Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix, not even a question.
Favorite thing about Pittsburgh?
Favorite thing about Pittsburgh? All right, well, I just had Pamela's pancakes for lunch. So if I'm seeming a little sluggish, that is the reason why. I love Pamela's. My favorite thing about Pittsburgh, honestly, and this is so true, because even when I meet Pittsburghers at like Steelers bars in New York or anywhere, Pittsburghers are the warmest, best people on the planet. And I am so... and I like all of it, but it's like Pittsburgh people are the best, and I'm so proud. Whenever anyone assumes I'm from New York, which happens all the time because I've been there since college, I correct them immediately and say that I'm a Yinzer.
What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
My favorite Jewish holiday? Honestly, I'm gonna give you a twist with this one. It's Yom Kippur. What? No, bro. All right, here's why. Love Sukkot, who doesn't love Sukkot? Love Passover, who doesn't like Passover? The reason Yom Kippur is the absolute best is that you get to do a reset, you get to be reborn every single year. And if you're anything like me, you have a lot that you regret and a lot that you want to apologize for. And the idea that we have this thing built, we have this day built into the Jewish calendar where we get to decide, where we get to press reset on our life and decide the kind of person we want to be. I know people think it's the most depressing day of the year. I think it's the most hopeful and uplifting.
Time you got in trouble at CDS.
I got in trouble a lot. There are some stories I cannot tell, but I was like such a talker in class, as you can imagine. I was always, oh my God, right? I'm seeing some talkers here. I get it, I feel you. Like all of you, the guys that are talking to your BFF, I was exactly that person, so I don't take it personally. So I got in trouble all the time for that. Sometimes I was falsely accused, but I'm sure I deserved all of the punishment. But I was like really constantly being set. Like my best friend that I told you about, one teacher had a sign in his room that just said, "Benji, stop talking." And they could have had that same sign for me.
Your favorite Jewish food?
Favorite Jewish food? Oh God, I feel like I'm really could step in a minefield here with this group. This is a good question, right? Because I'm thinking naturally of Ashkenazi Jewish food, like matzo ball soup and stuff, but like it's good, but really I like a lot of Sephardic food. I like hummus. I like Israeli food, and those are my favorite Jewish foods. I like a good hummus with mushrooms and beef on top.
What is your favorite CDS memory?
My favorite CBS Memory. I have a lot of them. I remember kindergarten. Like I really remember. There was a teacher here called Mrs. Margolis, and she was the best teacher in the whole world. And her and Mrs. Brody were my teachers. And pulled out my first tooth, and I remember all of my teachers here. I remember being under their desk and like playing cards. So it's just like I have a lot of really good memories. I would say probably the most fun was the 8th grade. Do you guys still do the 8th grade trip to Israel? Yeah. Awesome. I loved that. That was amazing. That was really an incredible trip. So I would say those two.
Okay. Favorite book?
Favorite book of all time? Guys, you're killing me here. Honestly, a book that had like the thing that it comes immediately to mind is To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not sure if that's true, but that is the thing that comes immediately to mind as a novel that really made a huge impact on me as a young person.
Instagram or Snapchat?
Instagram or Snapchat. Check, guys. Okay, so this is where I'm aging myself. I know you want me to say Snapchat. I know what Snapchat is, but I'm only on Instagram of those two platforms. However, so I'm not on, I'm sure, now here's the thing, I work for a newspaper that is on Snapchat. That's the craziest thing, is that we have to make our stories now for all of these different platforms. So I'm sure that I will be joining Snapchat. I hope to follow many of you. I'm on Instagram though, and I'm on Twitter. So I'm going with Instagram.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for.
All right, CDS, give me 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Speakers can give you a few instructions.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Okay, so we do have a few minutes, and we're going to have Mr. Steinberg come out into the audience and in a very orderly fashion. If you have a question for our special guest, you raise your hand, and he will give you the microphone so that she can hear, and then you'll be able to hear the answer. So, Mr. Steinberg, you can hit that side, and I'll come over to this side.
I'm going to completely engage in nepotism right now. So, hold on. Stand up.
What's your opinion on the recent shooting in Las Vegas?
I'm not sure there's, this is on.
My opinion is that I'm sure the opinion shared by everyone in this room and any decent person in this country and the world, which that is absolutely tragic. Personally, I favor really, really strict gun control policies, which we can discuss after this if you'd like. But I think that I think the fact that that same day there were other mass shootings in this country that didn't even make the news is really terrifying. That it's become so regular. And one thing that I have to, that I'm aware of in myself, and maybe you guys feel this too, is that we're living in a world where it feels like there's a lot of sadness and tragedy happening a lot of the time. And it's really hard sometimes to not numb yourself and to like close your heart to it. And I found myself after Las Vegas to just wanting to shut down and not even think about it. And I sort of forced myself to go and read about the people who were killed and a lot of the heroes who saved other people's lives. So yeah, my opinion is that it's a tragedy and that there are way, way too many guns in this country and lacks gun control. And we need stronger gun control policies.
Okay, let's try one over on the, I'll just stand up. You're close.
Did you have Mr. St. Clair as a teacher?
No, but my sisters did. He wasn't here when I was here. I'm old, guys. I'm 33, so I didn't have him.
All right, what about on this side? I'm going to get a fourth grader.
What school did you like the most?
Of all the schools I went to? Come on. CBS, duh!
Okay, we're gonna go back
For
to
real,
this
I'm not
side.
just saying that because I'm here. It actually was my favorite. I liked it more than college.
Wow, I've been to a lot of
What's your favorite pizza topping?
Okay, favorite pizza topping. I honestly, legitimately like plain a lot. Now, if I have to go for a topping, I like peppers and onions, but I like plain too.
All right, stand up.
I sense there's a lot of like food writers and critics in this room.
Why did you decide to go to the New York Times?
That is a really good question. Okay, so why did I decide to go to the New York Times? So as we mentioned before, I was at the Wall Street Journal for a long time, and I really liked it there. I'm trying to think about how to tell this story in a concise way. But one thing that happened is that when it became clear, right, so there were all of these different Republicans who were trying to become the Republican nominee for president. And there were a lot of people that I thought would have been wonderful, like Marco Rubio or maybe Jeb Bush, or a lot of people that I thought would have been good. But I really, really did not think Donald Trump would be one of those people. And I was working, as I mentioned before, at an editorial page that was sort of Republican. And there was a big debate that went on inside the editorial page of people that were more pro-Trump, people that were anti-Trump. And I was one of the people that was really anti-Trump and felt that we should be really, really loudly criticizing him. And I ended up really leaving the Wall Street Journal over Donald Trump. I think that if he hadn't been elected and Hillary Clinton had been elected, I might have stayed there. But I didn't feel comfortable with, I felt we should be much more strongly criticizing him than we were. And that's honestly why I left.
Okay, on this side, Kiva.
Was there any piece of writing that you got specifically
criticized for? Like, and what was it?
Yes. So I get criticized a lot for a lot of things that I write, very publicly. I would say the thing that I got criticized for the most is hard, because I really get criticized a lot, but I wrote a piece pretty recently about, there's an idea that is gaining a lot of force in sort of elite circles about the idea that you should stay only in the lane that you're born into. Meaning, if you're born Chinese, if you're born gay, if you're born Jewish, that you only really have the right to have opinions about the things that you only know that are a result of your personal identity. And the phrase that's used to describe that is sort of this idea of cultural appropriation, or we call it identity politics. This is really complicated, but basically, I got a lot of criticism for a piece I wrote that said, you know what, actually, borrowing things from different cultures is awesome. Borrowing things from different cultures is one of the things that makes this country, which is a melting pot, so special. Is the idea that, unlike other countries where it's sort of like a caste system, we get to sort of dip in and dip around into different parts. And I wrote a piece about that that got probably 20 different articles criticizing me or responding to me. One guy wrote a 3,000-word essay criticizing me. And yeah, that one got a lot of criticism, but really a lot of them do. Anytime I write something really praising of Israel, I get a lot of criticism also.
What's your favorite thing to do in New York?
My favorite thing to do in New York? I really love everything about New York, but my favorite thing, I live right near Central Park. How many people have been to New York? I'm just curious. Oh, wow. Okay, a lot. I had not been to New York. I went to New York when I was 12 or 13. I try and walk every day. So my office is a really famous building. It's really beautiful. You should come check it out when you're in New York. It's right in the middle of Midtown, like Times Square. But I live on the Upper West Side right near the park. And my favorite thing every day is that I try and walk through the park every day to go to work. Because one of the things that I find in my work, which is I'm constantly staring at screens, I'm always looking at my phone, I'm always like jumping around between my phone and my computer, is sometimes you have to be outside for a little bit to kind of clear your head, and I really need that every day. And I also like having a drink a lot of times at the end of the day. That's another favorite thing.
We're gonna be over here. Owen has a question. Stand up.
What is your favorite movie?
Okay, I love everything written by Aaron Sorkin. So I love The West Wing. Yes! The movie that I go to the most is not the most impressive movie, but he made a movie called The American President that The West Wing is based on. And it's starring Annette Bening and Michael Douglas, and I love that you love this, and that's just honestly my favorite movie. It's not the sophisticated answer, but it's the truth.
Hamburgers or pizza?
I couldn't hear.
Hamburgers or pizza?
Burgers.
I kind of have a two-part question.
Okay.
Are you involved in the big community of culture and art in New York? And how does that affect your writing style?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the best things about being in New York is definitely not how much space you get in your apartment, but we live in shoeboxes, and the trade-off is that you get to live in a city with the best dance, theater, music, art in the world. And I don't always do my best, but I try and take advantage of that, and it definitely affects my writing. Sometimes I'm writing about those things that I'm seeing. I think I mentioned that I wrote the most recent piece I wrote was about a rap that Eminem did. So I write about culture a lot. But the other thing is that seeing good art or good movies or good plays opens your mind and makes you more creative. And that's for me, a really essential part of being a good writer is exposing myself to different kind of things that inspire me. I saw this painting exhibit earlier this year. There's a painter, a black painter called Kerry James Marshall. I had never heard of him. I went to go see this show.
Oh, he's doing the portrait.
Oh yes, and he's doing Michelle and Barack Obama's portraits, exactly. I had never heard of him, and I thought about this show and the way that he used traditional art forms to show characters and personalities that otherwise, black personalities that wouldn't otherwise be in those traditional forms. You should look him up. Anyway, I've been thinking about that show since the year that I've seen it. So I really think it's important to expose yourself to those things.
Maybe Mr. Steinberg, maybe one more.
All right. Thank you.
Who do you meet when you are at the New York Times?
Who do I meet, like other writers or?
Yes, other writers.
Other writers. Well, one really cool thing is that I work on the same floor as a lot of the people maybe you guys have heard of, like Frank Bruni or Gail Collins or David Brooks or Nick Kristof and all of the other columnists in the paper. So all of those people are there working on the same floor as me, so I get to talk to them and have lunch with them. And one really cool thing that you realize is that people that maybe you thought were out of your league or were too fancy for you or that you admired, oftentimes they're just normal people like you and me who also prefer Aiellos over Minios and just want to have lunch with you.
All right. Everyone, put your hands down. All right. I know we could do this all afternoon.
But what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to show our appreciation to our guests.
And listen, please. All right. And I also wanted to thank Madison and Julie for doing a great job with the questions. Good job.
To the entire